Hey, welcome back, Military Journeyman. In this video, I'm going to be interviewing my good friend MST1 August Klotz about his experience of being an MST and what you can expect. And we're going to be answering some of those questions about, like, what exactly does an MST do? Is MST right for you? What can you expect after you become an MST? What are the certifications going to be like? We cover a lot of really good information and a lot of the questions that I hear in this interview series. So hope you guys enjoy and talk to you all very soon. Let's just roll into that video. Hey, what is going on, Military Journeyman? In this video, I have my good friend MST1 August Klotz. And MST1 is going to be talking to us about what it's like being an MST, and we're going to be talking about his experience about becoming an MST, what MST is actually like, and then we are also going to be talking about being a recruiter, as August is also a recruiter. He's been a recruiter for probably, what would you say, about half of your career now?
Yeah, pretty much 8 years.
Okay, so a lot of experience, being an MSD, a lot of experience as being a recruiter. So super exciting episode, and let's roll into this. So would you mind giving yourself a quick rundown of your Coast Guard career, when you joined and where you are now?
Sure. I joined in 2002, shortly after my daughter was born. I always tell her, she's 18 now, so my Coast Guard career is a month and a half younger than my daughter. So I'm about to turn 18 in the Coast Guard in about a week. So 18 years ago, 2002, I joined. I don't know if I mentioned it to you before. I'm Native Alaskan, in UPEC. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but I joined from Boston, strange enough, and came into recruiting Delta 162 in 2002, April 30th. That's my anniversary date. I was a recruiter's dream. Now that I'm a recruiter, I kind of know, because I asked for guaranteed 17th district, which is Alaska. And a lot of times the company commanders, the assignment officers have a hard time filling Alaska, and they're just select and direct, hey, you're going to Alaska. A lot of people end up loving it, but my recruiter guaranteed me Alaska, and it was an easy one to pull. You want to go to Alaska? Sure. Makes it easier. One less person in boot camp that we have to say you're going to Alaska. So I went to Coast Guard Cutter Spar, Kodiak, Alaska. It was my first duty station. And I knew I was in it for the long haul, and I wanted a buoy tender. I had worked on ships before. I was in the commercial fishing industry before I joined the Coast Guard. So I knew I wanted a working boat. I wanted a buoy tender. So I went to Cutter Spar in Kodiak, Alaska, and I knew I was in it for the long haul because I joined to be an MST. And I knew even back then that's always been a long waiting list. And I didn't end up waiting that long. It was 2 years. Then I went to MSTA school, Yorktown, Virginia. First assignment as an MST was Marines Safety Office. Back when we had those Milwaukee, it changed to a sector, Lake Michigan. From there, I short toured. I volunteered to go over to the Middle East, PAT 4 Squad, Coast Guard Cutter Monomoy. That was during Operation Iraqi Freedom. I enjoyed that. That was a busy time. I did that for a very specific reason, to get the priority one and the extra incentives that they were throwing at us back then. That was the Christmas relief crew of 2006 to Christmas 2007, Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I used that to get priority one to go to sort of my dream job, which was San Diego, California. That was the first place that I'd been where it was a full tour. Love San Diego, California. I don't know have you ever been stationed in San Diego?
No, just I was in ITA school up in Petaluma, so I stayed around the
Okay.
San Francisco, San Jose area.
Yeah. Northern California is pretty too. Didn't have a school out there myself, but I went there for instructor developmental course for recruiter, which was recruitment instructor, which was pretty cool. I enjoyed it out there. But San Diego, beautiful. I love Southern California. All of California is really beautiful. So I actually did a full tour out there, and then that's when I got the idea to kind of apply for and see if I could get it into recruiting special assignments. I had already made first, so why not? I put my package in, competed, and got picked up and it was a big challenge going to New York City. For me at that point, so it was only something you saw in the movies still. Even though I've been to San Diego, I sort of graduated slowly through the Coast Guard. Kodiak, Milwaukee. Milwaukee's not that big of a city. San Diego, bigger, and then New York. Doesn't get much bigger than that as far as the United States. So from there, I got extended as a recruiter. I trained a lot of the new recruiters that were coming in. Coast Guard Recruiting Command must have enjoyed what I did up there because they asked me if I would come down and be an instructor for a recruiter school at Cape May. And I was pretty hesitant about that being Cape May. And it's Cape May, so I was a little bit hesitant about it, but I saw it as a great honor. So I took it, and I'm happy with my job right now.
So your first unit or your first rated unit when you became an MST, you did a short tour, and then you went to another unit where you were doing something unrelated to MST before you became a recruiter?
I did, yeah. I didn't mention it, but some of my first qualifications as an MST were not traditional MST ratings. My first qualification as an MST was a boarding team member. A lot of people don't realize that. People don't realize the Coast Guard and our law enforcement mission. So that was the very first qualification I got as an MST. It was an option on the Cutter Spar, but they didn't really need me, and I was happy doing what I was doing on the Cutter Spar already. But they definitely needed me MST. This was still the world pretty recent after 9/11. So our defense maritime missions were really moving up. Back then, I remember just about everybody got some level of boarding team qualification, and especially us. We were doing a lot of the missions for the maritime realm with commercial industry. I just remember doing a lot of presence patrols on ferries and shore patrols. So that and boarding officer, that's really how I got my next unit in short tour, Pat Forsois. There are virtually no MSTs, and they definitely don't do what I did over in the Middle East, which I always kind of relate to some of my recruits that I'm talking to, or my applicants, I should say, because you probably know. How long has your career been?
About six years now.
About 6 years. You've probably done a lot in that 6 years already, right? Mm-hmm. And at that time, that was 3-4 years for me in the Coast Guard. And I was doing all sorts of things that weren't really within my rating. So really, it's as far as you want to take it in the Coast Guard. So that boarding officer experience, really not a traditional MST qualification or anything like that. And that's really what took me over to the Middle East. They just really needed boarding officers over there.
I think that's pretty unique, and why I love having guys like yourself on the channel is because people join the Coast Guard because you wanted to become an MST, but then you did things that being in the Coast Guard, experiencing different things, it opened up your eyes to different possibilities to where you are right now, where you fell in love with recruiting, and that's something that you wanted to continue to pursue, and those opportunities were able to open up for you. But I want to go, and I know you've been in for quite a while now, and I'm sure that MST has changed since you first went in. But since you are a recruiter, you're still an MST. You're well versed, in that world. Can you kind of talk to what is an MST? What are maybe the misconceptions that maybe people have when they think of an MST? Maybe being like a duck scrubber is one of the things that we always kind of joke around with. But what really is an MST in the Coast Guard?
So first, let's spell it out. It's a marine science technician, right? This is how I always equate it to applicants that ask. And it's funny because when I was a recruiter in New York, I learned all the aviator missions, and I was working with a bunch of aviators. So I could tell them, if I had an applicant asking me about aviator, I was comfortable talking about it. But anytime they had a marine science technician, they would always just like, oh, go talk to August. He'll tell you about MST stuff. So yes, definitely. The best way I like to put it is there's a big maritime world out there. 3/4 of the earth is covered by water. There's a lot of commercial industry out there. for the United States, the Coast Guard, and particularly the marine science field, the marine safety field, MSTs, marine safety officers that are also included in that mix. We are the regulators of all of that industry out there. You don't get anything, an iPhone or an iPad, that doesn't cross over seas at some point. And that's really the most economical way to transport goods. So whether it's commodities or oil, petroleum products, just about anything travels over the water. And the Coast Guard is the #1 regulator for the United States on our waterways. So we regulate everything, all the shipping that comes in, all the shorefront facilities, just about anything that you can think of, all the different types of shipping, all the different, from cruise ships to container ships, container inspections, not just the ships on the water side, but the docks on the shore side too. You know, you go to LA or New York, they have huge container yards, or cruise ship terminals very similar to an airport terminal. Those are all regulated by the Coast Guard. So a lot of times, one of the MST roles is prevention, and it's this is how I would tell an applicant: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Coast Guard is known for our cure. We save 14 lives every single day. You can't quantify how many lives are saved by preventing in the first place, and that's part of what MSTs are. The duck scrubber thing that you mentioned, that's because we also respond to the pollution that's out there, but it's not us that's really, for the most part, in the Tyvek suits or anything like that. That we're more the government money man that manages the cleanup. So we're making sure that the companies that are hired by the federal government for a pollution cleanup are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that they're doing it safely, because we're worried about protecting life as well, and that they're accounting for all the costs that the government is incurring for a cleanup. And then we may have to go back, if there's a responsible party, to build a case for that responsible party to be held liable as well.
So going back to that, you said that being an MST, you're either going to be on prevention or response, and those are really the two main missions
typically
that MST will do.
Typically, yes. And I've been out of the game for a bit, but that's the case. Yeah.
So when people are joining the Coast Guard, what is the, because what you said sounds really different than maybe what people maybe think of what an MST does. When people think of MST, they think of oil spills, response, environmental work, all of these things. But from what you said, it sounds a little bit more logistical. It sounds more like, making sure that things have standards and policies in place. What do you hear applicants that are coming in, recruits, when they are interested in MST? What are those typical thoughts, and then how do you explain what MST actually is to them?
Yeah, I definitely had some misconceptions myself. I thought, okay, I care about the environment, and I want to be part of cleaning it up, and there is that aspect of it, but it's more just we are the responsible party, or at least the people that are making sure that action is being taken. If that makes sense. Some of the misconceptions I hear is, it's funny. I've been at recruiting events as well. This ties into the MST as well, where they're putting me at like a high school career fair right next to Greenpeace. And Greenpeace, oh, Coast Guard, you're law enforcement. We don't like you guys and everything like that. And we're like, well, we protect the environment as well. That is what we do. Our waterways, the United States waterways. In fact, probably more so than you do. At least we're out there, enforcing the regulation. I didn't mean that to sound negative or anything like that. We're out there enforcing the regulations to make sure that it's protected. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions there. It's when I first joined, I thought, and this is the reason I joined the Coast Guard, and I found out later. I thought Coast Guard, okay, that's the least military that there is. And, So that's why I joined now. And I looked for the job. I found the job as an MST, and it's like, okay, that's right in my alley. That's kind of like not very military. I could buy off on that. I found out all the military stuff later on, and 3-4 years later when I went over the Middle East and I got boarding officer qualified, I really enjoyed the law enforcement aspect more so than I did the pollution investigation.
So what is an MST when they what does an MST do when they first report to their unit?
It's really going to vary by where they're going to, whether they're going into prevention or going into response. They're going to just like anything else, though. They're going to have to check in with their chain of command, find out a lot of what the specific area is. For example, if you go to LA, there's everything. There's containers, there's cruise ships, there's break bulk cargo containers, just about everything that you can think of. So it's really just like anywhere else you go. It's area familiarization. You got to learn the port, and then the starting qualifications in relation to what's actually out there. If that does that make sense?
And do you get to choose whether you're going to be prevention or response in a school, or is that something when you show up to your unit, you get to choose which one you want, or do you have to go through a linear path once that's been decided?
It's been a long time since I've been in A school. The way they did it for us, they kind of did it by ranking priority. And coming from Kodiak, I was pretty lucky because I was higher up on the rank. They did take priority into account, and they consider that CONUS, so it was a higher priority. They consider that, and it was really up to us. They gave us the billet and what the billet entails. That's what's on paper. A lot of times it's not always the case. And then when you get to your command, they can always switch back, And as a junior MST or as a junior coastie even, you got to be flexible. You got to be willing to learn. You might be in prevention, don't get too comfortable. You learn all prevention stuff, you get your qualifications, great. Well, we want to make you a better, second class petty officer. We want to make you a better first class petty officer, a better chief, senior chief, warrant officer, inspector, whatever the case might be. So the best way to do that is to get you out of your comfort zone. Hey, here's some other qualifications that you need to know as part of the rating. And it's going to give you that different perspective so that you can really be a better MST or a better coastie.
So what is an MST doing as a second or as a third or second class versus what maybe a first or chief would be doing?
They're operating, military journeyman, a third class, right, would be learning and getting those quals, working on those quals, so that they can be more competitive to make second. A second class probably has quite a few quals already. You'll see a lot of second classes with the Marine Safety Insignia already, which is 4 major Marine safety qualifications in 5 years. With the permanent one, you can get the temporary one as soon as you get the 4. I think that's the case still. And then you're not going to see a lot of first class MSTs without the Marine Safety Insignia. So that means at least 4 Marine Safety quals, and they may be, sort of assisting chief run the shop, and the chief is there to help train. They may be involved in not just some of the basic qualifications. For example, we're talking about prevention. Let's narrow that down a little bit. Prevention, you could talk about vessel inspections, port state control, and just the bare bones minimum qualification would be any vessel. This is what you need to know. And then there's applicable or progressive applicability. A cruise ship has a whole nother has all those bare bones, but then has a whole nother set of regulations because it's a cruise ship. And a oil tanker has a whole nother set because it's an oil tanker. And progressive applicability. So a third might get port state control. That's pretty good. That's a hard qual to get. And then a second might have port state control and break bulk. Might have a couple others, might have a facility ship, I'm sorry, a container ship, might have a cruise ship. If you're down in Miami or San Diego or Los Angeles, maybe cruise ship. Whereas you go a little bit further, you got a first that is dedicated most of their time to port state control and vessel inspections. They're going to have about all of them. And then there's that pathway too to go for warrant officer as a dedicated marine inspector in that field. And then that's almost all you're doing is you're going out on your own doing marine inspections on vessels.
And what is the daily work life like in MST? Are they really long hours? Are they Monday through Sunday? What does a typical work life of an MST look like?
I actually miss the work life I had in San Diego. It's pretty good for the most part. You have your set what you need to do. It's prevention. You have your set. These ships are coming in. These ships are what we're going to go inspect. Or you have only so many facilities in the area if you're a facility inspector. This is our calendar for the year. We have got an annual inspection, and maybe we'll do a couple of follow-ups. We'll do a drill scenario with one of the facilities, and you can really plan out. You can almost have your whole year planned out. There's still the emergency things that happen as well. Deepwater Horizon. I don't know a single MST, whether it was active duty or reserve, at that time that did not go down to the Gulf of Mexico, somewhere along the coast in response to Deepwater Horizon. So there's that aspect too. But day to day, you usually it's a little bit different than being on a cutter. Let's say, you're going to be at home, sleep in your own bed. Some places you'll go and you'll have some type of an overnight watch with the command center. But a lot of places, it's very similar to a yeoman in a lot of aspects where you can count your days most of the time being like a 9-to-5 office job. You may have to work some overtime. You're not going to get paid overtime, but you may have to work some extra because something big came up. It's your responsibility. You get a lot of responsibility. But the work life is pretty good. You got a whole shop full of other marine science technicians, other MSTs with you that can help carry the load, and not a lot of surprises. There's always going to be a few. Not a lot of surprises, at least in prevention. Let's take, for example, you've got a ship that's coming in, you're doing an inspection, and you find something manifestly wrong where it's unsafe. That could be a long day, because now you got to go do a captain of the port order, make sure that ship stays where it's at, doesn't move, doesn't cause a safety hazard for the people on board or anybody else that may be operating on the waterway, and you're routing it up the chain. That could be a long day, and then you have to do all the follow-up action. But at the same time, hey, you can go home at the end of that long day, hang your hat up, and feel pretty good about yourself that I caught that, or my team may have prevented those lives that we can't count in those 14 lives we save every day in the Coast Guard. So most of the time it's pretty good though.
Now you talk a lot about response, and I was also stationed at a sector, and we had the MSTs there, and they have their prevention response units. But is response something that's just not as big of like the MST mission, or there are not as many people that do response?
There is. That was actually one of the first Milwaukee is not a good place to go as a third class straight out of A school. There just isn't a lot of maritime infrastructure to learn from. Whereas if you really want to base your career on petroleum products, go down to Texas. You can learn so much and get a good high paying job in that industry when you leave. So I don't have a lot of experience in response. Some people absolutely love it. That was why I became an MST, the pollution response. But then once I got pollution investigator qualified, it wasn't what I thought it was, and I just didn't enjoy it. You're getting calls for everything, whether it's pollen on the lake. Well, it looks like there's some pollution in the lake, so somebody calls it into the National Response Center. Next thing, we get the call, on our duty phone or whatever the case might be, and we have to go take a look, which is fine. But for all sorts of little things, there's some, and in Milwaukee, at least in my experience, there's not a lot of marine industry up there, so it was more like going out to the marina for a sheen and just working the case and trying to find a solution. So I didn't find personally the pollution response aspect of it very fulfilling. I liked the facility aspect of it more, and then out of nowhere, I liked the law enforcement. So I had my opportunity to lateral over to ME, and I stuck with MST.
And with that, what are the types of units that an MST can end up at? Do MSTs go on cutters, or are they all land-based at sectors doing prevention response?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's what draws a lot. That's a really good question. That's what draws a lot of people to marine science technician is 90, you could probably say 95, 98% of the, maybe even higher of the jobs are shore based, with it being very competitive. So the only cutters that have MST billets are the polar icebreakers, which makes it competitive to get it. Like people, there's so many MSTs, so few billets, it makes it competitive to get underway, which is almost like flipping the script for a lot of ratings, like culinary specialist or bosun's mate, whatever the case might be. They might go back to back cutter tours, and I just don't want to go on a cutter. I want to go more shoreside. That's not a problem for marine science technicians. You got to fight to get underway. It's reversed.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people reach out to me on the channel and they say, how can I not end up on a cutter? I want to do something where I don't have to get underway. Maybe, I'm sick of the water or anything like that. And there are specific types of rates where they don't get underway that much. And it sounds like MST is one of them. Do MSTs have any other options or any other availability? Let's say you go MST. Or I guess the first question that we should maybe talk about is what type of person is best suited for MST?
Oh, that's another great question. You definitely need to have attention to detail. You need to have some organizational skills, and these are all things that you can learn. You have to care about the world around you and want to be part of the solution. And that goes not just MST, but that goes for all people looking to join the Coast Guard. There's a fit, for almost everybody. Not everybody's going to be a good fit, and maybe it's not a good fit for everybody as well. But universally, I think the best aspect is humility, a humbleness, being humble, but also attention to detail, organizational skills is a definite plus for MST. Assertiveness is great. You could be a very junior MST, a third, a second, and if you have those qualifications, those are some of the same qualifications as some officers and warrant officers and senior chiefs can get. You can get them. It's just a lot of study and a lot of experience. If you get those, they pay dividends. You can take it as far as you want it.
So an MST is a person that's going to be more in the books. It's more heavy on the curriculum and studying.
Yeah, A school has probably changed dramatically since I've been to it. But yeah, our school was a lot in the books. You're learning. They said at the time, I don't know if this is something they still say, it was all an exercise in learning your resource material. If I'm out doing an inspection and I find something wrong, I think that's wrong, I need to know how to look and double check. I don't need to memorize everything about every type of inspection. I need to know my resources and have those resources available so that I can double check. That doesn't meet regulation. A lot of MSTs are really good. That's why they're book smart and they score really well on the service-wide exam. It's a lot of book smart. So definitely, but it's all about learning your resource. You don't have to memorize it all. The more you do, the better off. But it is a lot about learning your resources.
You know,
Having your head in the Code of Federal Regulations and all of the different resources.
the in the Coast Guard, there's a lot of ratings where people join the Coast Guard because I joined because of the missions and just the amount of different options that are available. We have AMTs, ATs, and they have helos and really high high octane, high operational units. We have ITs that are going out and responding to things as they break. And ITs could end up on cutters. They could be land based. What type of for an MST though, is there a lot of different variation in the types of missions or the things that you can do? Like an example again of that is like, as an IT, I could be on a boat if I wanted. I could go, something a little bit more operational. I could do something that's a little bit more laid back. Is there that type of variety for an MST?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. You're not stuck in any necessary field. If you haven't had a response tour and you want to build up some of your qualifications and see what it's about, usually even at the same unit, we traded MSTs at Sector San Diego, especially for a lot of the junior MSTs to help them rank up. Okay, you're a third over in response. You got most of the quals you can get over there, and you're still competing to make second. How about come over and check out prevention? We'll just switch you with this MST. We'll switch you spots so they can learn and become a better MST and help them advance up if they want. And you can learn. I've known MSTs that were also engaged with investigations, like when there's a marine casualty on board as well. Still within the response realm for the most part. And usually that's a junior officer. That's a lieutenant or a JG or an ensign's job. They go to special school for that. MSTs can do that too. There's a lot of bleed over. At least when I was in my last Marine safety unit was San Diego, so that's 8 years ago now. But there was a lot of that in there. When I first reported in, I was doing commercial fishing vessel safety, which is sort of a niche field within inspections. And I was the only enlisted person in there. I was working with a bunch of warrant officers, JOs. I reported to a lieutenant, and that was it. And the whole program was mine for commercial fishing vessels. It was a good setup for recruiting because I had my own budget to get my own Coast Guard gear. At the time, that program, I haven't kept up with it. They really wanted us to distinguish voluntary compliance. Hey, you volunteer, we come to the dockside and we check out your ship. We'll give you a decal, and at least the law enforcement guys that are going out there and checking, if they see that decal, they'll be more inclined to leave you alone and go find somebody that didn't volunteer for an inspection. So it was polos, khakis, so that we could distinguish from the uniform, the ODUs and the gun belts and all of that, so we could distinguish from the law enforcement.
That's one of the things that I see with a lot of MSTs, at least at the unit that I was at in Sector St. Pete, was that the MSTs and the officers worked very closely hand in hand. What's the big difference from what the MSTs are doing versus what the officers that are also in prevention or response doing?
There's not a lot. We could be on the same team. So you could have a junior officer that's new in the marine safety field that is still working on a port state control. And you could have a third class MST that's working on a port state control on the same inspection. Or you could have the ensign or JG that is the inspector and they're just an assistant, So it really can bleed a lot. I've known MSTs, I've known seconds, I've known firsts, definitely chiefs and senior chiefs that have filled all those same roles, same qualifications, been in the same bullpen as as warrants and junior officers, doing the exact same, has the exact same qual, exact same mission. So there is a lot of bleed over with, and that's why you'll see a lot of MSTs with all that book smart too, and being so close to the officers that are doing the exact same mission. It's very easy to fleet up from an MST doing the marine safety mission to an officer that's doing the marine safety mission, and it makes a good officer too. Okay, well, I've been doing it since I was an enlisted member, and I have filled your shoes in the past. And definitely on it.
And one of the big things that I know a lot of people are interested in MST for is because of the qualifications and the types of jobs that could be lined up outside of that. What how do people stay MST for a full career? Is that a common thing, or are people actively recruiting MSTs to use their qualifications outside in the civilian or federal sector?
Definitely. If you're good at your job, it shows. I avoided, because I wasn't big on petroleum stuff, but I know shipmates that have. It shows. And the people that you are working side by side as a regulator, it's very easy to go from regulating and knowing all of the resources and knowing all of the regulations and imposing those regulations on an entity on the water to going and being a complier. I know the regulations. Now I just have to comply. So we'll just use, for example, the oil industry, right? If you're a marine science technician or in the marine safety field and you have all these qualifications to regulate a petroleum facility, it is very easy to turn that around and now comply. And they will hire MSTs. They may even ask you, when are you getting out of the Coast Guard? Here's a 6-figure job and we want to hire you, because your job is to make sure we're in compliance with Coast Guard rules, and that's it. We know you know your job. You're very good at it. You've shown us all these things where we're either discrepancy or you've caught all these mistakes that we've done. We want to hire you, and here's what we'll pay you to make sure that we're in regulation with the Coast Guard regulations. So yeah, it can be. You can get a lot of qualifications that could be quite lucrative.
Do you see a lot of MSTs getting picked up out of that? Like, what would be the reason why staying in the Coast Guard as an MST if you have the potential for these high 6-figure jobs?
I guess it depends on the individual, really. I do it for love of service, and I didn't fall in love with the Marines. I mean, that's why I'm a recruiter. I didn't fall in love with the marine safety mission personally. I enjoyed my time. I had a great work-life balance. I see the value in it, but I'm definitely more into the recruiting thing.
Okay,
that's just me.
And I think that's a good time to transition over to being a recruiter and what that is. If you're planning on joining the Coast Guard and you want to be connected with other people that are preparing to go to boot camp, then you should join our Facebook group, the Coast Guard Boot Camp Preppers, to connect with other people in the military journeyman community. Go ahead and share tips and tricks. If there's anything that you are doing to be able to help study, then be sure to join that group.